50,000 voices. One city. One artist. When Kendrick Lamar touched down in Sydney, Australia, he didn't just perform. He created a moment that would ripple through hip-hop history. This is the story of how a kid from Compton turned Sydney into his kingdom, and why what happened that night proves he's operating on a different level than anyone else in the game right now. Welcome to Celebrity Rap Life, where the red carpets never roll up and the spotlight never fades. The rewards are legendary. Because in celebrity rap life, every downfall can become a comeback, and every headline tells a deeper story. Hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss a second of what's coming next. Sydney's iconic venue, packed wall-to-wall with over 50,000 fans, the air thick with anticipation. The lights drop. The crowd erupts. And then Kendrick Lamar steps onto that stage and proceeds to deliver what many are calling one of the greatest live hip-hop performances Australia has ever witnessed. But here's what makes this story fascinating. It's not just about another successful concert. It's about technical mastery, cultural impact, and the moment when an entire city became a witness to greatness. Let me take you back to the lead-up. Kendrick's Australian tour had been generating massive buzz for months. Social media was ablaze with anticipation. Tickets sold out in record time. But nobody, and I mean nobody, could have predicted what was about to unfold. Sydney has a rich history with hip-hop. From the early days of local artists building the scene to hosting international legends, the city's crowds are known for their energy. They're educated listeners. They know their hip-hop. They don't just show up, they participate. And Kendrick was about to give them the performance of their lives. Now, let's talk about something that had everyone in that arena absolutely mesmerized: Kendrick's breath control. If you've never really thought about breath control in rap, let me break down why it matters and why what Kendrick does is borderline superhuman. In hip-hop, breath control is the difference between good and legendary. It's the ability to deliver complex, rapid-fire verses while maintaining clarity, emotion, and power, all without sounding like you're gasping for air. Think of it like this: a sprinter can run fast, but a marathon runner who can sprint at the end of 26 miles? That's different. That's elite conditioning. That's what Kendrick does with his voice. Throughout the Sydney performance, Kendrick was delivering verses that would leave most rappers doubled over, and he was doing it while moving across the stage, engaging with the crowd, never missing a beat. Songs that are studio perfect become nearly impossible to replicate live for most artists. The layered vocals, the rapid switches in flow, the emotional intensity. Something has to give when you're performing live. But not for Kendrick. Witnesses in the crowd reported that on tracks like Mad City and DNA, Kendrick's live delivery was somehow even more intense than the recorded versions. His voice carried across that massive venue with crystalline clarity. Every syllable hit. Every breath was controlled. Every pause was intentional. What makes Kendrick's breath control so exceptional? Let's get into the science for a moment. Professional vocal coaches who've analyzed his technique point to several factors. First, there's the diaphragmatic breathing, breathing from the belly rather than the chest, which allows for more air intake and better control. Second, there's his understanding of where to breathe within his verses. He's not just gasping between bars. He's incorporating breath as part of the rhythm. But beyond technique, there's something else: conditioning. Kendrick trains for his performances like an athlete. Multiple sources close to his camp have discussed how seriously he takes his physical preparation. This isn't just about showing up and rapping. This is about building the stamina to perform at 100% intensity for an entire show, night after night. Back to Sydney. The crowd wasn't just watching, they were locked in. When an artist has that level of technical control, it creates a different kind of concert experience. The audience can fully surrender to the performance because they're not worried about the artist struggling or cutting corners. They know they're watching mastery. And Sydney gave it right back to him. The call and response moments were electric. When Kendrick would pause, the crowd would fill the space with such force that the entire venue seemed to shake. This wasn't just entertainment. This was communion. Australian hip-hop journalist Marcus Chen, who was in attendance, later wrote in his review, "In 20 years of covering concerts, I've never seen an artist command a crowd like this." Kendrick didn't just perform for Sydney, he connected with Sydney on a molecular level. But let's zoom out for a second. Why does a Kendrick Lamar concert in Sydney matter in the bigger picture? Because it represents something larger about hip-hop's global reach and Kendrick's unique position within it. Hip-hop was born in the Bronx. It spread across America. Then it conquered the world. But that globalization hasn't been uniform. Some artists translate internationally, others don't. What makes someone like Kendrick resonate in Sydney the same way he does in Los Angeles, or New York, or Lagos, or Tokyo? It's the combination of technical excellence, authentic storytelling, and universal themes. Kendrick raps about Compton, but he's really rapping about struggle, perseverance, identity, and hope. Those themes transcend geography. A kid in Western Sydney might not have the exact same experiences as someone in South Central LA, but they understand the essence of what Kendrick is communicating. That's why when he hit the stage in Sydney, it wasn't just Americans in the audience nodding their heads. It was everyone. The universality of his artistry created a unified experience. But the opening moments of the concert were just the beginning. What happened next would prove that Kendrick wasn't just technically proficient, he was a master curator of emotion, capable of taking an audience on a journey they'd never forget. Here's something most people don't understand about great concerts. The set list matters. It's not just about playing your hits, it's about constructing a narrative arc that takes the audience on an emotional journey. And in Sydney, Kendrick proved he's a master storyteller not just in his songs, but in how he structures an entire evening. The show opened with the kind of energy that immediately established dominance. High-tempo tracks that got the crowd moving, that reminded everyone why they'd waited months for this moment. But Kendrick wasn't just coming out swinging. He was setting up what would be a carefully orchestrated emotional roller coaster. And then came DNA. If you weren't there, it's hard to fully grasp what happened when the opening notes of DNA hit. The crowd didn't just cheer, they exploded. Over 50,000 people suddenly moving as one organism, all energy directed at the stage. DNA is already one of Kendrick's most intense tracks. The production is aggressive. The lyrics are confrontational. The delivery is relentless. On the album, it's a statement of identity and power. But Live in Sydney, it became something else entirely. Kendrick's performance of DNA showcased everything we talked about in Part 1 about breath control, but it also revealed his understanding of crowd dynamics. He knew exactly when to let the backing track carry moments, when to go completely a cappella, when to let the crowd rap entire sections. He was conducting an orchestra of 50,000 voices. Social media footage from the concert shows the entire venue shaking during the chorus. People reported feeling the bass in their chests, the collective voice of the crowd creating a physical presence. One attendee tweeted, "Kendrick performing DNA in Sydney wasn't a concert moment, it was a spiritual experience." The reference that echoed. During the performance, Kendrick delivered the line, 30 million later, "Know the feds watchin'," with particular emphasis. For those unfamiliar, this line references his massive success and the scrutiny that comes with it. But in the context of this Sydney performance, it took on additional meaning. Here was an artist at the absolute peak of his powers, performing on the other side of the world from where he started, commanding the kind of crowd that most artists only dream about. The line became a meta-commentary on the moment itself, a recognition of how far he'd come and how the whole world was indeed watching. Then came Family Ties. This is where Kendrick demonstrated his understanding of hip-hop's generational shifts. The track, featuring Baby Keem, represents a bridge between Kendrick's established legacy and the new wave of artists coming up. When he performed it in front of 50,000+ people in Sydney, it wasn't just about the song. It was about showing respect to the evolution of the culture while maintaining his position at its forefront. The energy for Family Ties was described by multiple attendees as absolute cinema, a perfect phrase that captures how the performance transcended mere music and became a visual, emotional, complete artistic experience. The lighting, the stage presence, the crowd's reaction, all combined to create something that felt cinematic in scope. What's particularly noteworthy is how Kendrick adjusted his performance style for this track. With his own material, he's the undisputed center of attention. But on Family Ties, he made space for Baby Keem's presence, even in absence, showing a generosity and confidence that only true masters possess. He wasn't protecting his spotlight, he was expanding the moment. And then, the emotional pivot that would define the night. All right. If DNA was pure aggressive energy and Family Ties was cultural celebration, All Right was something deeper. It was hope, resilience, and collective healing. For those who need context, "All Right" became an anthem during the Black Lives Matter movement. Its chorus, "We gon' be all right," was chanted at protests, became a rallying cry, represented hope in the face of systemic oppression. The song transcended music and became a cultural touchstone. When Kendrick performed it in Sydney in front of that sold-out crowd, he wasn't just performing a song. He was invoking a shared understanding of struggle and perseverance that resonates globally. The Australian crowd, perhaps not dealing with the identical issues as African Americans, still understood the universal message. Despite everything, we endure. Multiple eyewitness accounts describe this as the emotional peak of the evening. People were crying. People had their arms around strangers. The entire venue became a congregation, and Kendrick was preaching a sermon of hope. The performance was described as different, and that capitalization matters. It wasn't just good or great, it was different. It operated on another level. Kendrick's delivery was raw, emotional, vulnerable in ways that stadium performances rarely are. He wasn't hiding behind production or spectacle. He was standing in front of 50,000 people, bearing his soul, and trusting them to meet him there. Reports from that night consistently mention the palpable sense of love in the venue. This wasn't just a transactional concert experience where fans pay for entertainment. This was communion. This was connection. The phrase, "There is love in the air in Sydney, Australia tonight," captures something essential about what happens when an artist and an audience truly sync up. It's rare. It's special. And it's impossible to manufacture. Kendrick achieved this through a combination of technical excellence, emotional honesty, and respect for his audience. He didn't perform at them, he performed with them. He trusted them to understand the depth of what he was presenting, and they rose to meet that trust. What happened in Sydney wasn't just about one night or one artist. It represented something about the current state of hip-hop and live performance. In an era of auto-tune, backing tracks, and studio wizardry, here was an artist proving that raw talent and authentic connection still matter most. But the night wasn't over. The final act would cement this performance as legendary. Kendrick Lamar shutting it down in Sydney, Australia. That phrase, "shutting it down," carries weight in hip-hop culture. It doesn't just mean finishing a show. It means dominating so completely that there's nothing left to say. It means closing with such authority that the conversation is over. You won the night. Period. And that's exactly what Kendrick did. As the concert moved into its final chapters, the energy in the venue somehow continued to build. You'd think after hours of high-intensity performance, both the artist and the crowd would start to fade. But the opposite happened. It was as if everyone in that space realized they were part of something special and refused to let the moment end without giving everything they had left. Let's talk about what Kendrick's body was doing during this performance. By this point in the show, most artists would be visibly exhausted. The voice would be getting raspy. The movement would slow down. Corners would be cut. Not Kendrick. Vocal performance coaches who've analyzed footage from the Sydney concert note that his voice actually seemed to get stronger as the show progressed. This goes against everything we understand about vocal fatigue. It's not that Kendrick isn't human or doesn't get tired. It's that his preparation and technique are so advanced that he's able to manage his instrument in ways that defy normal expectations. There's also a psychological component. When an artist feeds off crowd energy, it can create a second wind that pushes past physical limitations. The Sydney crowd gave Kendrick so much energy that he was able to channel it back through his performance, creating a feedback loop of excellence. Throughout the entire show, but especially in these closing moments, Kendrick demonstrated why he's considered one of the greatest technical rappers of his generation. His flow switches were seamless. His enunciation remained crisp despite the marathon performance. His rhythmic pocket, that intangible quality of sitting perfectly within the beat, never wavered. For hip-hop purists in attendance, this was validation. In an industry that sometimes prioritizes image over ability, here was proof that technical mastery still matters. That the craft of rapping, breath control, delivery, flow, presence, is an art form that deserves respect. Music producer and hip-hop historian James Liu, commenting on social media after the show, noted, "What Kendrick did in Sydney is the equivalent of a jazz musician playing a 3-hour improvised set without a single wrong note. It's mastery at the highest level." One fascinating aspect of the Sydney performance is how thoroughly it was documented by fans. In the age of smartphones, concerts are no longer ephemeral moments. They're captured from thousands of angles and shared globally within minutes. The clips from Sydney went viral immediately. But what's interesting is which moments resonated most. It wasn't just the big spectacular productions. People were sharing moments of Kendrick's breath control, his emotional delivery during All Right, the pure joy on his face during certain songs, the way he interacted with the crowd. This organic documentation serves as evidence for anyone who wasn't there. You can watch footage from Sydney and understand why attendees describe it in such reverential terms. The camera doesn't lie about energy and connection. It's worth noting that Australia's relationship with hip-hop has evolved significantly over the past 2 decades. What was once seen as an American genre has been embraced, localized, and celebrated. Australian hip-hop artists have developed their own unique style while paying respect to the culture's origins. When international artists like Kendrick come to Australia, they're not performing for casual observers. They're performing for educated fans who understand the nuances of the culture. The Sydney crowd's reactions throughout the night showed this sophisticated understanding. They weren't just vibing to beats, they were catching wordplay, recognizing references, appreciating technical elements. This made Kendrick's performance even more impressive. He couldn't coast on star power. He had to deliver substance, and he did. In the days following the Sydney performance, the conversation in hip-hop circles, both in Australia and globally, centered on what Kendrick had achieved. Music journalists scrambled to find adequate words to describe what had happened. Social media was flooded with testimonials from attendees. But beyond the immediate reactions, there's a longer-term impact to consider. Concerts like this set new standards. They raise the bar for what audiences expect from live hip-hop. They inspire other artists to elevate their craft. They remind everyone why live performance matters in an era when music is often consumed through headphones and algorithms. Young artists in Australia, and around the world, who saw footage from that night or heard the stories, now have a blueprint for what greatness looks like. Not in terms of spectacle or production budget, but in terms of pure artistic excellence. So what's the conclusion to this story? What's the takeaway from Kendrick Lamar's legendary night in Sydney? It's this: in an era of artifice and auto-tune, of manufactured moments and social media stunts, there's still nothing that can replace genuine artistic mastery combined with authentic human connection. Kendrick didn't need gimmicks or tricks. He needed only his voice, his breath control, his catalog, and his respect for the audience in front of him. What happened in Sydney wasn't just a great concert, it was a reminder of why hip-hop matters. It's a genre built on skill, on storytelling, on the power of words delivered with precision and emotion. Kendrick Lamar stood in front of 50,000 people and proved that when done at the highest level, hip-hop is not just music, it's transcendent. The night showed that breath control isn't just a technical skill, it's the difference between performing songs and creating moments. It demonstrated that an artist who truly respects their craft and their audience can create experiences that resonate far beyond the duration of a concert. Sydney won that night. They got to witness greatness. But more than that, everyone who was there became part of hip-hop history. The night Kendrick Lamar showed the world what happens when technical mastery meets emotional truth meets 50,000 people ready to receive it. That's the story. That's the legacy. That's why, when people talk about the greatest live hip-hop performances of this era, Kendrick Lamar in Sydney, Australia will always be part of that conversation. This story is far from over, and the truth is still unfolding. I want to hear what you think. Drop your take in the comments. And if you don't want to miss the next twist, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss a second of what's coming next.